What if that's just a good question right there? Hey, I noticed you're angry today. Do you know where that's coming from today? I don't know how well that would go, but that's just an example. And so say like back to the like your divorce is the only thing on your like on the table. Take that topic in front of you of what it is, and then ask the other person a question that can help draw out what's deeply inside of them. And if you keep doing that to each other, I guarantee you're gonna start seeing like I'm glad you joined us today because we're working through wisdom and what that looks like in an unconventional sense in ways that you have maybe never thought about before. Sorry, tongue-tied a little bit there. Last week, we worked through how silence is wisdom, and today, I'm going to teach you that asking questions is wiser than you think. How did I arrive at this conclusion? Working through the book of Job, and I'm looking at what the three friends did and what Job did, as the three friends represent kind of the big like arching overall personalities of wisdom, of human wisdom in the world at that time, and probably just in general. And if so, we're working through that. So welcome in today to the Revived Podcast. Join us today, and we're going to dive in here shortly. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about first, before we get into the story of Job here, was we're going to talk about questions. Are questions wise? Why questions? So if we look at wisdom as literally living by principles that are just built into the earth of like, hey, tell the truth and it's good for you, that's wise. And that's just a principle that's built into the world. So why ask a question? Why is questions considered wise? Why did I come to this conclusion? Well, as I look at my kids, 3, 5, well, the other one doesn't talk yet. So I got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, just about 6. And I look at them and they ask me questions all the time. And so they're like, Dad, can I do this? Mom, can I do that? And it's awesome. But then I started thinking, I'm okay, if I'm going to give the analogy that wisdom is asking questions, what's the difference between a toddler's question or I guess toddler, semi-toddler? What's older than a toddler? Anybody know? If you do, let me know. Because I think it kind of goes to the type of question that's being asked. So when my toddler says, hey, can I go to the bathroom? Hey, can I have this candy? Hey, can I eat this? If you guys have kids out there, do most of the questions that come in, are they about food? Because for me, they are. They are mostly about food, it seems. Like maybe can I go outside and play? Can I go in the basement and play? You know, if we said like don't go down there or something, the kind of questions I'm asking right now sound like I'm a very restrictive parent. I promise I'm not restrictive. Why, if that's where your brain goes of just like, how is asking questions wise? Is it wise for my child to ask me, can he go outside and play? I don't think wisdom is in the back of his mind saying, hey, let me see if it's wise to go do this and ask the question. What I'm noticing here as I'm reading through Job is when his friends respond, it seems like every single line is a question. For example, Eliphaz, he responded, and I'm just looking at this very briefly, and literally in the second line of his response, he says, for who could keep from speaking out? You go a little bit further down. Stop and think, do the innocent die? And then you keep going. Can a mortal be innocent before God? Can anyone be pure before the Creator? There's so many questions just in one little stanza. And this goes on. Each of his friends do this. Even Job's first speech, we see him asking questions. Why, as I laid on my mother's lap, why did she nurse me at her breast? And why wasn't I buried like a stillborn child or something like that? It turns like very dark, but this story is very not a happy story. It's like Job is living his life. And so I started wondering, what is the type of question that we see a pattern for being asked by these people? So Eliphaz, he continues his response. He says, which of the angels will help you? That's another question. Cry out for help, but will anyone answer you? You go a little bit further, we'll see here Job has a second speech, and he even asks some more questions. Don't people complain about unsalted food? Does anyone want the tasteless white of an egg? You know? And let me see here. Let's keep on going, you know? Because his other friend responds, Bildad, and he says, how long will we go on like this? Does the Almighty twist what is right? Can marsh grass flourish without water? You see what they're doing here? Do you hear it as I'm giving you these examples? What I'm picking up, and this is where I'm trying to dive in to study this of like, what is this wisdom piece? I haven't gone through all the Bible study tools yet, so don't hold me out to dry on this, but I do want to offer a perspective of wisdom that's standing out to me is when we're in these conversations with people and when we're in conversations about our life, Are we asking questions? And we're not asking questions about can I do something or can I not? You're almost asking wisdom is instead of saying, well, God's not always wrong, instead of saying statements, it's more of like asking somebody, you ask the question to confirm the truth of like, does the Almighty twist? I love that one question he said here. Abilidad 8 verse 3, does God twist justice? Does the Almighty twist what is right? And like that's kind of a backhanded way of them, Billadad actually telling Job that God doesn't do this. God doesn't twist justice. But instead he asks it as a question. So the questions that I'm referring to that are wisdom questions are not whether or not you're allowed to do something, but more of it's wise to ask a question instead of directing just straight responses at people in certain situations. That's what I'm getting from going through Job some more here, especially since I noticed every single one of these chapters, every single one of these people are asking questions, and they're not asking dumb questions. Some of them are in here are just like, okay, that's just a normal question. But most of it is like those examples I gave of they state facts in a question. And for some reason, when we hear questions as people, I don't know if you're like me, I was out to like with my friend. Anytime I'm out with my friends, not just one friend, and they'll say like, hey, how's life going? And I'm like, okay, answering the questions. I don't know if God's like on my side or whatever. And then they'll ask a question, usually just like, well, how do you know? Well, that doesn't align with God's character, so you're wrong. It's like wisdom says to handle conflict or to handle tough situations. If you want to bring truth into the conversation, ask it with a question. That's how it seems to me. And this is a very new idea. This is a new revelation that I'm noticing is when I find myself in situations in hard conversations, and we're very good at wanting to say like, well, God didn't say that. God said this is right. God all the way this, or this money decision is right this way. Like math goes that way and finances go up and down like this. Relationships work out this way. You pick and choose whatever the question is. We all find ourselves in those heated or those strong conversations with people. Have you ever decided to say your truth as a question? Like, does God twist justice? Maybe you're arguing with a friend. Think about this for an example of whether or not God is fair and just. And so you're arguing, and then you just go to your friend, well, God is just. He's always just. He's full of justice. And then your friend's just going to respond with his rebuttal. But then to follow Billadad's advice of just like, well, does God twist justice? Notice what this does. This is questions seem to disarm, and it puts I am now responsible for a response to that question instead of coming up like so think of two statements as just statement and statement, and it's, boom, they rebuttal each other. Okay. It's like negative and negative on a battery or something. You can't put the two together. But when you ask a question, it's like the positive and the minus. It's like, it says, okay, cool. Like now you can't just get away from me. There's going to be a part of you that has to acknowledge what I just said, and you get to wrestle for yourself whether or not you agree it's true. But then you now get to have the conversation with yourself. This is where I think this is wise. Because we can be in conversations with people where we just want to just yell the truth at them and yell like, you should vote for this political party, or you should understand this legislation. I think politics is a really good place for this to play out in your life, because I think we're very polarizing when it comes to the politics and our choices and what we believe, especially if we tie our faith to it. But can we just use politics as the platform example? Can you ask your statement of, I believe you should vote left, or I believe you should vote right, or right in the middle? And instead of saying your statement to which why that is true, ask the question about why that's true. And then it puts it on the other person to be able to think about that and respond. And I think this is actually how we make progress in relationship, conflict resolution. Like imagine, okay, so this is a podcast helping men with their faith. Sitting down with your wife and you're both talking about the finances, like, oh, maybe she's saying you spend too much money or you save too much money and you're not like enjoying life or anything like that. Where can you ask a question instead of just coming out with a statement against her, a statement against the way that just the world works or the way that money works, and play it out in your head right now? Play it out in your head, interacting with your wife. If you asked her a question of, well, why do you think we're spending too much money on groceries? Or are the groceries really this expensive? Turn all these statements instead of groceries are really expensive. We spend too much money on groceries or something like that. And then notice how when I said it as a question, you probably were thinking to yourself, I wonder why it's expensive. I wonder why it's this way. It's a lot more disarming and it's a lot more conflict freeing. And so I don't think it's a conventional. That's where I'm really just like, I can't believe Job is a wisdom book. But now I'm reading through it. I'm like, the way that these people interact with each other is phenomenal. I want to dive down more into the specifics of what they're saying, but as I'm noticing, there's like, it's more of like what they do that's really standing out to me. Like we covered last week in Job 1 and 2, where the friends just sat and silence was like very wise, and the act of silence is wisdom. And as we continue on through their conversation, I noticed that the act of asking questions and asking good questions with a lot of truth wrapped into it, like who likes the white of an egg? Apparently, no one likes the white of an egg, so that's why the question was asked. It's kind of like rhetorical questions are almost wise. Are they wise? Are rhetorical questions wise? I don't know. But asking questions, why make me your target? Am I your burden for you? Just take away my guilt. So there's some honest questions in here, so they're not all like specific. But you see what I'm saying? Go read Job 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of them, and you'll start seeing this pattern too of these people ask questions outside of like the statements they're making, and it's really to make you think. Does wisdom have more to do with making you think than it actually has to do with living a certain way? Does wisdom have more to do with just the internal conversation you're having with yourself over trying to change someone else's mind? So, because if you have this principle of life that is wisdom and it's never changing and it's just built into the way the world works, like I talked about earlier about truth, it's like truth will always lead to a better life. Okay. Even if it sucks. And it's always wise to tell the truth. You don't have to convince anybody of that, but depending on what you believe about that, it's just like you play it out in your mind. It will always backfire on you initially, but in the long run, it plays out. So, where can you see in your life asking questions playing out in a positive way? Where in your life can you look at having conflict and having hard conversations with your spouse, with your kids, with your friends, with other relationships? And instead of yelling and match at each other, start asking the good questions about what does God say about that? Where in God's word do we see this played out? Okay, we know that God is compassionate and merciful, so maybe ask the question if someone's angry against God, isn't God compassionate and merciful? And then the person tries to answer that question. So let's put them in my shoes. So going back into like the fall and the story of that me and my wife went through of miscarriage, and questioning like, is God compassionate and merciful? I never sat down with somebody and no one asked me kind of the questions of, well, is God compassionate and merciful? Because if I sat down across with somebody, I think my initial response would be to say, no, God is not compassionate and merciful. But I don't know if I'd be telling the truth because I don't know, deep down in my heart, I'd be doing some thinking. I would be doing some investigating with my thoughts in my life. And if I was honest, someone can say, hey, Stephen, is God compassionate and merciful? And I would sit there and I would actually, let me take a pause. Hold up. I'll sit there and I'll think. I'll scratch my chin. For you audio listeners, I'm scratching my chin. And I'm thinking and I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, my gut instinct, my jerk reaction wants to say, because I went through this, no, God is not compassionate and merciful. But when I sit in it and I actually start evaluating and thinking based off everything I know and have learned about Jesus and God, I start seeing, I'm like, okay, I know he's compassionate and merciful. Where is compassion in this scenario? Where is mercy in this scenario? And it makes you think about it differently. And so instead of rebuttaling of like, I'm hurt, I'm not going to feel this way, and I'm going to just cut off basically anything you're saying, this question is now changing my internal perspective. It's really drawing out from inside me what I really believe and know to be true. Isn't that fascinating? Can questions be so disarming that they bring out what is really like we are able to go deep into our minds and our hearts and bring out the truth about God into the situation that we're in? Is that what good questions do? Do good questions take defenses and conflicts and throw them out the window and allow us to bring out the inner part of us that's truthful and honest? Because do good questions have the power to mend relationships? And Matt, if you and your wife are at such odds right now that it's just like divorce is the only thing on the table, what if you started asking each other, not dumb questions. If you don't know what wise questions are, start reading the Bible. But look at the topic of this area. If you're struggling in your relationship right now, look at the topic that is putting tension in between you, whether it's where time is spent or just how relationships are going in between you or whatever it is. and then ask the question. Maybe we can have a whole nother podcast of how do you develop a good question, because that is another thing to know. If I think my husband or my spouse, husband or wife, is just has anger issues, and I want to deal with them, it's just like you can't come out and accuse them of anger, because what are they gonna do? They're gonna get angry. So how do you ask them a wise question of where do you think the anger comes from? What if that's just a good question right there? Hey, I noticed you're angry today. Do you know where that's coming from today? I don't know how well that would go, but that's just an example. And so say like back to the like your divorce is the only thing on your like on the table. Take that topic in front of you of what it is, and then ask the other person a question that can help draw out what's deeply inside of them. And if you keep doing that to each other, I guarantee you're going to start seeing like you're going to draw out deeply what's inside. Not just the knee-jerk reaction of we put on our fight or flight mode, and so we're either going to fight or we're going to run away. And those are with like the knee jerk, hey, here's the one-liners, and we're just like dodging, bobbing, weaving, punching those and making our way through it. But man, it's like throwing a net over somebody when you ask a good, wise question, because it traps them and it forces them to kind of work through the tangles, work through it, and then honestly, it slows things down enough that you kind of get better perspective inside that conversation. My brain is running with 10,000 different things right now because this is so profound to me of, wow, I never knew that I could have such better conversation with people if I focus less on what I wanted to say and more on how can I draw them out with wise questions. And maybe I can say what I want to say, but through a question. And also too, this is where you can kind of take this even further. Asking questions makes it not about you. And it's wise to not live life in selfishness. You can kind of see where this all goes like full circle. It's like living a selfish life gets you nowhere. Asking questions gets you to like have a relationship with people. It gets you to be invested in other people and not yourself. Self-focus is the ultimate detriment to like your own life. It's like when I listened to like an amazing sermon today by John Tyson, and he just talked about how our culture is so like we try to live out of the place of just self so much. But even like old like Aristotle type timed people, like back in the way old Roman days, they even knew that living for self was dangerous. And so you couldn't do that. But now we live in this day and age where it's like, it's all about you. It's all about yourself. No wonder we have a problem. We all are not supposed to be living that way, but we all choose to do it anyway. So wisdom is getting the focus off of you and getting it onto other people. And what's one way that you do that? Ask good questions. So to wrap this up, what's the challenge? Next time you're in a conversation that seems tough, intense, or it might be a hard conversation, where can you start the conversation by asking good, wise questions? Not dumb questions like that are sarcastic and backhanded, you know what I mean? But actually ask questions. It's like if you're going up to your wife and you really want to know about the finances and you don't want to sound like you're accusing her again or you're coming after her again, ask the question of just like, hey, can you help me understand this, why we're spending more money here than we normally do? Can you soften what you want to say in a question and then get to understand it from the other person's perspective? Get to know life from the other person's shoes. You see where this asking questions, we can go down 10 million different rabbit trails right here. Do you see where asking questions leads to all these different avenues of wisdom? Where it's just like I said, it's not about you, it's about them. And then it's like, oh, wow, I'm drawn into you. And like now you're helping me see life from your perspective. I'm living life in your shoes. It's just phenomenal when you just play this out in your head. I don't have time today to go into everything, but I hope I rambled enough for you today that you understand that asking good questions is wise. So thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Challenge of this week is go read your Bible, Job 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Notice the questions that are asked and how many questions are asked. And if these people are the kind of the pillars of the human wisdom and they're asking questions that we kind of know the answers to and they're not dumb questions, then maybe that's something we should be paying attention to ourselves. So this week, ask good questions and listen. I guess listening is the other piece. If you're going to ask a question, sit there and listen. So thanks for joining us this week. I hope you guys have a good one. Take care. Cheers.